You don't belong in this room. The sentence landed harder than the soft piano echoing beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Astoria Grand Hotel in Manhattan. Conversations slowed. Champagne glasses paused halfway to painted lips. Even the string quartet near the marble staircase seemed to lose rhythm for half a second. Naomi Brooks stood motionless beside table 12, one hand wrapped around a silver tray, the other tightening slightly around a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet worth more than her weekly paycheck. She didn't answer. She had learned a long time ago that men like William Carter rarely expected replies from women like her. Especially not black women in uniforms. William Carter, billionaire CEO of Carter Dominion Capital, sat at the center of the private VIP lounge like he owned gravity itself. At 48, he carried the kind of presence that silenced rooms before he even spoke. Tailored charcoal suit. Silver watch. Calm blue eyes sharpened by years of boardroom victories and billion-dollar negotiations. The financial media called him the king of American real estate. Employees called him something else when he wasn't around. Cold. Ruthless. Untouchable. Tonight's event was supposed to be another triumph. Investors from Chicago, Silicon Valley executives, old money families from the Upper East Side. More than 400 guests gathered beneath golden lights and 20-foot ceilings to celebrate Carter Dominion's newest $4.2 billion acquisition. Cameras flashed every few seconds. Waiters floated between tables carrying trays of lobster risotto and truffle steak. Wealth moved through the room like perfume. Heavy. Expensive. Invisible. Naomi kept her eyes lowered as she stepped back from the table. "Sorry, sir," she said quietly. William barely acknowledged her apology. His attention had already returned to the men seated beside him. "These service staff are getting bolder every year," one investor muttered under his breath before chuckling into his whiskey glass. A few others laughed softly. Not loud enough to be called cruel. Just enough to remind Naomi exactly where she stood. Invisible when convenient. Noticeable only when someone needed someone beneath them. But Naomi Brooks had spent 26 years surviving rooms like this. Rooms where smiles were polite but eyes carried judgment. Rooms where people praised diversity while snapping fingers for another drink. She worked double shifts 6 nights a week while helping her mother cover chemotherapy bills in a one-bedroom apartment in Harlem. She was exhausted most days. But exhaustion and weakness were not the same thing. Naomi moved silently through the ballroom as another wave of applause erupted near the stage. William Carter had just finalized the acquisition deal live in front of the press. Billionaires shook hands beneath camera flashes. Reporters leaned forward like hungry wolves waiting for a headline. Then it happened. William loosened the cuff of his shirt while reaching for the contract folder. Just slightly. Barely enough for anyone to notice. But Naomi noticed. The tray in her hand nearly slipped. There, beneath the crisp white cuff on William Carter's wrist, sat a faded black tattoo. Half sun. Half wing. Simple. Small. Impossible. Naomi stopped breathing for a moment. Her heart stumbled hard against her ribs. Because she knew that tattoo. She had seen it her entire life. On her mother's shoulder. Hidden beneath old sweaters. Protected like a secret too painful to explain. William sensed someone staring and looked up sharply. His eyes met Naomi's across the table. "Is there a problem?" he asked coldly. The room quieted just enough to listen. Naomi swallowed hard. Her voice came out softer than she expected. "Sir," she said carefully, almost afraid of the words herself. "My mom has a tattoo exactly like yours." Silence. Real silence. The kind that doesn't just quiet a room. The kind that changes it. William Carter did not answer right away. That was the first thing everyone noticed. The man famous for commanding boardrooms with instant precision suddenly looked like someone searching for air in a room full of smoke. His fingers tightened slowly around the crystal whiskey glass in his hand. Not enough to crack it. Just enough for the ice cubes inside to stop moving. Around him, the private lounge had gone unnaturally still. Investors exchanged uncertain glances. A woman near the piano lowered her champagne flute without taking a sip. Even the photographers standing near the stage hesitated, confused by the tension spreading through the ballroom like invisible static. Naomi immediately regretted speaking. She could feel every eye in the room sliding toward her uniform, her name tag, her skin. She had crossed a line she did not fully understand yet. "Excuse me," William finally said. His voice was calm, but the calmness felt forced, like glass stretched too thin. Naomi swallowed carefully. "I am sorry, sir," she said softly. I recognize the tattoo." William leaned back slightly in his chair, studying her now with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. Not the dismissive glance of a billionaire looking past hotel staff. This was different. Focused. Sharp. Almost uneasy. "Where did your mother get it?" he asked. Naomi blinked, surprised by the question. "I do not know," she admitted. "She never talks about it much." William's jaw tightened almost invisibly. 20 years of discipline kept his face controlled, but his eyes betrayed something else. Memory. Fear. Regret. Emotions men like him usually buried beneath money and marble office towers. One of the investors laughed awkwardly, trying to break the tension. "Come on, William. Half the people in New York have tattoos." But William did not even look at him. His attention stayed locked on Naomi. "What is your mother's name?" he asked quietly. Naomi hesitated this time. Something about the way he asked made her chest tighten. "Elena Brooks," she answered. The reaction was immediate. William's face lost color so subtly most people would have missed it. But Naomi saw it. His breathing changed first. Then his posture. The billionaire who had spent the evening controlling billion-dollar negotiations suddenly looked like a man ambushed by his own past. Across the ballroom, the jazz band continued playing soft background music, but now it sounded distant. Muffled. Like noise underwater. William slowly set his glass down on the table. "How old are you?" he asked. 26. Silence again. Heavy this time. Dangerous. Naomi could feel the room shifting around them. Conversations had stopped completely now. Nobody understood what was happening, but everyone sensed something important breaking open beneath the surface. William looked away for a moment, staring toward the skyline beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Manhattan glittered below like another universe. Cold lights. Endless ambition. The kind of city where powerful men convinced themselves the past could never catch them. But memory was strange that way. Sometimes it waited decades before walking back into your life carrying a silver tray and wearing a hotel uniform. Naomi adjusted her grip on the tray nervously. "Sir, if I said something wrong, I apologize." William looked back at her immediately. "No," he said, almost too fast. Then quieter, "No. You did not." His voice had changed now. Softer. Less certain. And for the first time all evening, William Carter no longer looked like the most powerful man in the room. He looked like a man trying desperately to remember whether he had once loved someone enough to destroy both their lives. Naomi could feel the weight of the room pressing against her shoulders as she stepped backward from William Carter's table. The tray in her hands suddenly felt heavier than steel. Around her, conversations slowly restarted in nervous fragments, but the energy inside the ballroom had changed. People were pretending to move on while secretly watching every second. Because powerful men were not supposed to look shaken. Especially not men like William Carter. Yet the billionaire remained seated in silence, staring at nothing for several long seconds after Naomi walked away. One investor attempted to steer the evening back toward business. "William, the Singapore partners are waiting near the stage." No response. Another man chuckled awkwardly. "You are acting like you saw a ghost." William finally blinked. "Maybe I did," he said quietly. The men around him exchanged confused glances. Meanwhile, Naomi disappeared through the side doors leading into the service corridor behind the ballroom. The moment the doors closed behind her, the glittering luxury of the gala vanished. Gone were the chandeliers and jazz music. Back here, the walls were plain white. The air smelled faintly like dish soap and coffee grounds. Workers rushed past carrying trays and silverware while managers barked instructions into headsets. Real life lived behind the curtain rich people never noticed. Naomi leaned against the wall for a second and exhaled shakily. "Girl, what did you say out there?" another waitress whispered, eyes wide. Naomi rubbed her forehead. "I do not even know." But deep down, she did know. She knew because she had seen that tattoo before every birthday, every Christmas, every difficult year growing up in Harlem. Elena Brooks carried the faded symbol on the back of her shoulder like a memory she refused to bury. Naomi remembered seeing it as a little girl while helping her mother brush her hair before church. Half sun. Half wing. A strange design that never made sense. Whenever Naomi asked about it, Elena always smiled sadly and changed the subject. "Some stories hurt too much to explain," she used to say softly. Naomi hated that answer growing up. Especially after realizing other children had fathers at school concerts and basketball games while her own father existed only as silence. Elena never lied about him. She simply erased him. No photos on shelves. No old letters. No bitter speeches either. Just absence. A clean wound hidden beneath years of survival. Naomi's phone vibrated suddenly inside her apron pocket. "Mom calling." Naomi answered immediately. "Hey, Mama." Elena's tired voice came through softly beneath the sound of a television in the background. "Baby, are you still working?" "Yeah. Big event tonight." "You sound strange." Naomi hesitated. Then she laughed nervously. "You are not going to believe this, but I just met a man with the same tattoo as yours." Silence answered her this time. Complete silence. Naomi straightened slowly against the wall. "Mama?" Elena inhaled sharply on the other end. Tiny. Barely audible. But Naomi heard it. "What man?" Elena asked quietly. Naomi suddenly felt cold despite the heat from the kitchen nearby. "His name is William Carter." The line went silent again. Longer this time. So long Naomi checked the screen to make sure. The call had not dropped. Then finally, Elena whispered something Naomi had never heard her mother say before. Not once in 26 years. "Oh God." Back inside the ballroom, William Carter stood alone near the enormous glass windows overlooking Manhattan. The city lights reflected across his face while memories he had spent decades outrunning slowly returned one by one. A tiny apartment in New Orleans. Summer heat clinging to skin. Jazz music drifting through crowded streets. And Elena Brooks smiling at him beneath a street lamp while promising that no matter what happened, some things were meant to find their way home. William Carter left the gala 30 minutes early. That alone was enough to shock Manhattan's business elite. Men like William did not walk away from billion-dollar celebrations. They controlled them until the final handshake, the final photograph, the final article praising their success appeared online before midnight. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter anymore. His driver opened the back door of the black Maybach parked outside the Astoria Grand Hotel, but William did not immediately get in. Cold November air swept through the streets while camera flashes exploded behind him near the entrance. Reporters shouted questions about the acquisition deal. He ignored every one of them. Because his mind was no longer in Manhattan. It was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere humid. Loud. Alive. New Orleans. 1997. Back before the custom suits and private jets. Before magazines called him a genius. Before he learned how powerful people could erase inconvenient parts of their lives. William closed his eyes briefly as memories returned with painful clarity. Elena Brooks standing behind the counter of a tiny jazz cafe on Bourbon Street. Soft gold lights reflecting across her dark curls while old trumpet music drifted through the crowded room. She had laughed easily back then. The kind of laugh that made tired people feel lighter just hearing it. William had been 22 years old, finishing graduate school while interning for his father's real estate company in Louisiana. Young. Ambitious. Desperate to prove himself worthy of the Carter family name. Elena had worked double shifts serving coffee and pecan pie while studying nursing during the day. Their worlds were never supposed to collide. But they did. Slowly at first. A conversation over burnt coffee after midnight. Shared walks through the French Quarter. Cheap takeout dinners beside the Mississippi River. Then love. Real love. The dangerous kind wealthy families hated because it ignored status and skin color and old expectations. William remembered the tattoo clearly now. A tiny shop tucked beside a record store near Jackson Square. Elena laughing nervously while the tattoo artist sketched the design. Half sun. Half wing. What does it mean? William had asked her. Elena smiled before answering. Hope and freedom, she whispered. Two things people like us usually have to fight for. William opened his eyes again inside the dark car as Manhattan blurred past the windows outside. His chest felt tight. Because memory was cruel that way. It never returned halfway. It returned complete. Every smile. Every promise. Every mistake. His phone vibrated suddenly beside him. Nathan Reynolds. His longtime attorney. William answered immediately. What is it? The board members are asking why you left the gala early. William stared silently out the window. Cancel tomorrow morning's investor breakfast. Nathan sounded confused. William, that breakfast includes the Singapore group and 2 senators. Cancel it anyway. Silence filled the line for a second. Is everything all right? William almost laughed at the question. All right. No. Nothing felt all right anymore. Because somewhere in Harlem, a young black waitress carried the eyes of a woman he once loved more than his own future. And suddenly the life he spent 20 years building no longer felt untouchable. Meanwhile, across the city, Naomi sat quietly beside her mother's bed inside their small apartment. Rain tapped softly against the windows while an old space heater hummed in the corner. Elena looked pale beneath the blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Weaker than usual. Older somehow. Naomi sat beside her carefully. Mama, she asked softly, who is William Carter? Elena did not answer. Right away. Her tired eyes drifted toward the faded photograph sitting face down on the nightstand. The one Naomi had never been allowed to touch growing up. Elena finally spoke so quietly Naomi almost missed it. He was the man who promised he would come back for me. Then her voice broke. And the man who never did. Naomi did not sleep that night. The city outside their apartment kept moving like always. Sirens somewhere downtown. Car horns drifting through Harlem after midnight. Rain sliding against old windows. But inside the tiny apartment, everything felt suspended in time. Elena sat quietly in the recliner near the heater, wrapped in a gray blanket while an old jazz station played softly from the kitchen radio. Neither woman knew how to speak around the truth suddenly standing between them. Naomi stared at the faded photograph resting on the coffee table. For 26 years, that picture had remained hidden inside drawers and boxes like forbidden evidence from another life. Tonight Elena finally let her see it. The edges were burned slightly, worn down by time and years of being handled too carefully. In the center stood a younger Elena smiling beneath bright Louisiana sunlight. Beside her was a tall white man in a rolled-up dress shirt, his arm around her waist. William Carter. Younger. Softer somehow. Less guarded. Naomi's chest tightened as she studied his face. "You kept this all these years?" she asked quietly. Elena looked down at her trembling hands. "Some memories leave scars even when you survive them." Naomi looked back at the photograph. "Why did you never tell me?" Elena closed her eyes slowly. "Because I spent years trying to hate him." Her voice cracked slightly beneath the weight of exhaustion and memory. "But hate takes energy. And eventually all I had left was you." Naomi sat silently beside her mother while the rain continued tapping the windows like distant fingers. "Did he know about me?" she finally asked. Elena hesitated too long. That was answer enough. Naomi looked away immediately, pain flashing across her face before she buried it beneath silence. "No," Elena whispered. "He never knew." Across Manhattan, William Carter stood. Alone inside his penthouse office overlooking Central Park. Nearly every light in the 42nd floor office tower had gone dark hours ago, but William remained awake staring at a file spread across his desk. Naomi Brooks. 26 years old. Harlem address. Part-time student. Waitress at the Astoria Grand. The private investigator had delivered the information less than an hour earlier after receiving an emergency call from William himself. Normally William hated digging into people's personal lives. Tonight desperation overruled principle. Because deep down he already knew the math worked. 26 years. New Orleans. Elena. His stomach twisted painfully. William loosened his tie and sat heavily in the leather chair near the windows. For decades he had convinced himself Elena abandoned him. That she stopped answering his calls. That she chose someone else. It was easier that way. Easier than questioning why his father suddenly transferred him to New York 2 weeks after graduation. Easier than wondering why every letter he mailed to Elena came back unopened. Easier than confronting the truth powerful families protected their reputations the same way kingdoms protected crowns. Ruthlessly. William opened the bottom drawer of his desk slowly and pulled out a small black box covered in dust. He had not touched it in almost 20 years. Inside rested an old silver necklace with a tiny sun pendant attached beside a feather charm. Elena's necklace. The matching piece to the tattoo. William stared at it while regret settled over the room heavier than silence. Wealth could buy buildings, politicians, entire city blocks. But it could not return missed birthdays. It could not replace 26 years of absence. And for the first time since becoming one of the most powerful men in America, William Carter felt something unfamiliar pressing against his chest. Shame. Real shame. Meanwhile, inside the Harlem apartment, Naomi stood alone by the kitchen sink watching rainwater race down the glass. "Mama," she said quietly without turning around, "if he really loved you, why did he never come looking for us?" Elena lowered her eyes toward the old photograph in her lap. Then softly, almost like confessing something she never wanted spoken aloud, she answered, "Because sometimes the people with the most power are also the easiest to control." The next morning, Manhattan woke beneath a gray sky heavy with winter clouds, but William Carter had already been awake for hours. His penthouse office smelled faintly like black coffee and rain carried in from the balcony doors left slightly open overnight. The television mounted across the room played financial news on mute while headlines praised Carter Dominion's latest acquisition as one of the largest corporate deals of the year. Normally, William would have been watching every market reaction carefully. Every percentage point. Every investor response. But this morning, numbers looked meaningless. Because for the first time in decades, something mattered more than profit. A quiet knock interrupted the silence. Nathan Reynolds stepped carefully into the office holding a tablet and several folders. "The board meeting starts in 40 minutes, he said cautiously. William did not respond immediately. He stood near the windows staring down at Central Park where tiny figures crossed icy sidewalks far below. "Nathan," he said finally, "did my father ever contact Elena Brooks?" Nathan froze. The question landed heavily inside the room. "William, do not lie to me." Nathan lowered the folders slowly onto the desk. He had worked beside William for almost 20 years. He understood tone. And right now, William Carter sounded less like a billionaire executive and more like a man standing at the edge of something dangerous. "Your father hired investigators back then," Nathan admitted quietly. "After New Orleans." William closed his eyes briefly. There it was. Confirmation. Cold. Final. He said the relationship would destroy your future. Investors were already questioning the family because Elena was black and working class. Your father believed the scandal would damage the company before your career even began. William's jaw tightened so sharply it hurt. So he made the decision for me. Nathan hesitated. He thought he was protecting you. William let out a hollow laugh without humor. No. He was protecting the empire. Silence settled across the office. The kind built from truths arriving 26 years too late. Nathan looked down uneasily before speaking again. There is more. William turned slowly. Your father intercepted the letters. The room seemed to tilt for half a second. What? The letters you mailed Elena after moving to New York. She never received them. William stared at him in disbelief. And hers? Nathan's silence answered before words did. William stepped backward slowly until the edge of the desk hit behind him. For years he had replayed Elena's disappearance in his mind like an unfinished song. The unanswered calls. The silence. The heartbreak. He had convinced himself she abandoned him. Because the alternative was too painful to imagine. But now the truth stood naked in front of him. She never left. She was taken from him by people who believed money mattered more than humanity. Nathan spoke carefully. Your father paid someone in New Orleans to tell Elena you chose your career over her. William looked physically ill now. The billionaire who once negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking suddenly looked like a man crushed beneath invisible weight. She was pregnant, he whispered. Nathan nodded slowly. I think she found out after you were already gone. William lowered himself heavily into the leather chair, one hand covering his mouth as emotion finally cracked through decades of discipline. Outside the windows, snow had begun falling softly across Manhattan. Quiet. Slow. Unstoppable. William stared at the silver necklace still resting on his desk beside Naomi's employee file. 26 years. 26 years Elena raised their daughter alone while he built skyscrapers and investment empires believing he had simply been forgotten. Power had given William Carter everything except the one truth that mattered most. And now that truth was destroying him piece by piece. Meanwhile, across Harlem, Naomi folded clean towels beside her mother's bed when someone knocked unexpectedly at the apartment door. 3 soft knocks. Careful. Uncertain. Elena looked up immediately, fear flashing across her tired face. Before she whispered the one name she had spent half her life trying not to say out loud. William. Naomi stood frozen beside the apartment door while the second knock echoed softly through the hallway. Not loud. Not demanding. Careful. Almost hesitant. The kind of knock made by someone unsure whether they deserved to be welcomed inside. Elena gripped the edge of her blanket tightly, her breathing suddenly uneven beneath the dim kitchen light. For a moment, nobody moved. Outside the apartment window, snow drifted slowly through the Harlem streets, coating parked cars and cracked sidewalks in pale white silence. Naomi looked back toward her mother. "Do you want me to answer it?" Elena lowered her eyes briefly before nodding once. Naomi walked toward the door carefully, her heartbeat loud enough to hear in her own ears. When she opened it, William Carter stood there alone. No security team. No assistants. No cameras. Just a tall man in a dark wool coat dusted with snow, carrying 26 years of regret across his face. The hallway light above him flickered softly while cold winter air slipped into the apartment around his shoulders. For the first time since Naomi met him, William looked smaller somehow. Not physically. Emotionally. Like power itself had finally stepped away from him. Neither spoke at first. William's eyes slowly moved past Naomi toward Elena sitting near the heater across the room. The moment he saw her clearly, something inside him broke. Elena had changed, of course. Time had softened her features and illness had stolen some of her strength. But she was still Elena. Still the woman from Bourbon Street. Still the woman who once danced barefoot beside an old jazz record player while laughing at his terrible cooking attempts in a tiny apartment 26 years ago. William stepped forward slowly into the apartment as if entering sacred ground. "Elena," he whispered. Her name barely survived his voice. Elena looked at him for several seconds without speaking. Then finally, quietly, she said, "You got old." A weak smile almost touched William's face before disappearing beneath grief. "Yeah," he answered softly. "Life did that." Naomi remained near the doorway, uncertain whether she belonged in this moment or had been shaped by it her entire life. The apartment suddenly felt too small for emotions this large. William looked toward Elena again, his eyes already shining with restrained tears. "I thought you stopped loving me," he admitted. Elena let out a painful breath. "I thought you abandoned me." Silence followed. Heavy. Human. No billion-dollar empire could protect William Carter from this room now. No carefully crafted public image could hide what regret looked like standing face to face with the woman he lost. "My father intercepted the letters," William said quietly. Elena's eyes widened slightly. "What? All of them?" His voice cracked this time. "I wrote you every week after New York. He made sure none of them reached you." Elena stared at him in disbelief while Naomi slowly sat down across the room, overwhelmed by the truth unfolding in front of her. William pulled a small bundle of worn envelopes from inside his coat pocket. Yellowed with age. Unopened. Elena covered her mouth trembling as she recognized her own handwriting on several of them. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. "I wrote those after Naomi was born," she whispered. William nodded slowly. "I know." He swallowed hard before looking toward Naomi for the first time since entering the apartment. His expression changed instantly the moment his eyes met hers again. Not because she was a waitress. Not because she was black. But because suddenly he saw it. Elena's eyes. His smile. 26 years of missing pieces standing right in front of him wearing a gray sweatshirt and holding back tears with every ounce of strength she had. William's voice nearly disappeared when he finally spoke. "Naomi," he paused, overcome by emotion too large to control. "I did not know you existed." Naomi looked at him silently for a long moment before answering with the kind of honesty only pain can create. "That does not change the fact that you missed my whole life." The words landed softly. But soft truths often cut the deepest. The apartment remained silent long after Naomi's words settled into the room. Outside, snow continued falling over Harlem in slow quiet waves, covering fire escapes and streetlights beneath soft white light. But inside apartment 4B, nobody felt peaceful. Because some truths arrive too late to feel beautiful at first. William Carter stood motionless near the doorway, staring at the daughter he never knew existed. 26 years old. 26 birthdays missed. 26 Christmas mornings. School graduations. Sick days. Broken hearts. Tiny moments fathers are supposed to witness. Wealth had placed private jets beneath his feet and skyscrapers beneath his name, yet somehow it had still left him standing here like a stranger in his own daughter's life. Naomi crossed her arms tightly, trying to steady herself emotionally. "Do you know what is crazy?" she asked quietly. William looked at her carefully. "I grew up seeing your face everywhere." William frowned slightly, confused. Naomi pointed toward the muted television playing financial news across the room. William's company logo glowed beneath stock market numbers at the bottom of the screen. For years people talked about William Carter like he was some kind of American dream. Self-made billionaire. Genius investor. Powerful businessman. Her voice trembled slightly now beneath years of hidden pain. "And all that time, my mother was taking 2 buses across the city for chemotherapy while I worked double shifts carrying steak plates for rich people who would not even look me in the eye." William lowered his head slowly. He deserved every word. Every ounce of anger. Because sometimes the cruelest wounds are not created by hatred. They are created by absence. Elena watched them both quietly from her chair, tears resting silently along her cheeks. "Naomi," she whispered gently, "he did not know." Naomi looked toward her mother immediately. "But I did not know either, Mama." Her voice cracked this time despite her effort to stay composed. "Do you know how many times I wondered why I was never enough for somebody to stay?" William inhaled sharply like the words physically hurt him. Because they did. More than boardroom betrayals. More than financial losses. Nothing had ever cut through him like hearing his daughter explain the emotional cost of growing up without him. He stepped forward slowly. Careful. Respectful. Like a man approaching something fragile. "Naomi," he said quietly, "if I could trade every dollar I have for those lost years, I would do it without thinking twice." Naomi's eyes filled instantly, but she looked away before the tears could fall. "Money cannot fix this." "I know." William's voice broke completely now. "That is what scares me." Silence returned again, softer this time. Less hostile. More human. Elena watched William carefully for several seconds before speaking. "You used to say success would never change you." William let out a painful smile. "Turns out success changes almost everyone." Elena nodded sadly. "No. Power does." Those words lingered heavily in the apartment because everyone there understood the truth inside them. Power had separated 2 young people in New Orleans decades ago. Power had erased letters, hidden pregnancies, controlled futures. And now power stood useless in a small Harlem apartment where a billionaire could not buy back his daughter's childhood. William slowly reached into his coat pocket again before placing the silver necklace carefully onto the coffee table between them. Elena stared at it immediately, emotion flooding her face. "You kept it," she whispered. William nodded once. "I never stopped loving you." Naomi looked down at the necklace, then at the matching tattoo barely visible beneath her mother's sweater sleeve. For the first time in her life, the silence surrounding her family history no longer felt empty. It felt unfinished. And somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the anger, beneath 26 years of loss, something fragile had finally entered the room. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But truth. And sometimes truth is the first real step home. 3 months later, spring sunlight poured across Manhattan like the city itself had softened. The snow was gone. Trees in Central Park carried fresh green leaves again. Street musicians returned to subway corners. Sidewalk cafes reopened beneath strings of hanging lights. Life moved forward the way it always does, quietly pulling wounded people toward whatever comes next. But for William Carter, nothing about life looked the same anymore. The billionaire who once measured success in acquisitions and market shares now spent most mornings somewhere far less impressive than his glass tower office downtown Harlem. Apartment 4B. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes coffee. Sometimes nothing at all except awkward attempts at conversation with the daughter he was still learning how to know. It was not easy. Healing rarely is. Naomi did not suddenly call him Dad. She did not run into his arms crying like movies taught people to expect. Real pain was slower than that. Real forgiveness had scars. But little things began changing. Small things. Human things. William learning she hated onions on burgers. Naomi discovering he still carried handwritten notes because Elena once told him phones made people emotionally lazy. Elena laughing quietly one afternoon after watching both of them argue over how to make proper Louisiana gumbo. Tiny moments. Fragile moments. The kind money cannot manufacture. Meanwhile, the world outside noticed changes too. Financial magazines reported that William Carter had quietly stepped down from several exclusive private clubs known for discriminatory membership practices. He redirected millions from Carter Dominion into scholarship programs and healthcare initiatives in underfunded black neighborhoods throughout New York and Louisiana. Reporters called it a strategic rebranding effort. They were wrong. This was not branding. This was guilt trying to become grace. One Friday morning, Naomi arrived at work expecting another exhausting double shift at the Astoria Grand. But the moment she stepped into the lobby, something felt different. Staff members whispered nervously near the reception desk. Managers straightened ties repeatedly. Then Naomi saw why. William Carter stood near the ballroom entrance wearing a dark navy suit while television cameras lined the walls nearby. Naomi froze immediately. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly after approaching him. William looked strangely nervous despite facing reporters worth billions in media influence every year. "Finishing something I should have done a long time ago," he answered softly. Before Naomi could ask another question, William stepped onto the ballroom stage beneath the bright lights. The room slowly fell silent. Reporters lifted cameras. Hotel executives exchanged confused glances. William looked out across the crowd before speaking into the microphone with steady but emotional restraint. "For most of my life," he began quietly, "I believed success meant building something powerful enough that nobody could take it from you." The ballroom remained completely silent. "But recently, I learned power without humanity is just another form of failure." Naomi stood frozen near the back of the room as William continued. 26 years ago, I failed two people I should have protected with everything I had." His voice cracked slightly now. "And no amount of money can erase that." Then, for the first time in public, William Carter turned toward Naomi completely. "No shame. No hesitation. Naomi Brooks is my daughter." Gasps rippled across the ballroom instantly. Cameras exploded in flashes. But William never looked away from her. "And her mother, Elena Brooks, was the greatest love of my life." Tears filled Naomi's eyes before she could stop them. Not because the pain disappeared. It had not. But because for the first time in her entire life, she was no longer hidden inside someone else's silence. Weeks later, a new women's healthcare center opened in Harlem funded entirely by Carter Dominion. No giant corporate logos covered the building. No gold letters carried William's name. Instead, one simple bronze plaque rested beside the entrance doors beneath spring sunlight. Elena House. Naomi stood beside her mother reading the sign quietly while children laughed somewhere down the block and traffic hummed through the city beyond them. Elena reached for Naomi's hand gently. William stood a few feet away watching both women with the kind of humility success had never taught him before. Because in the end, the most powerful thing in the world was never money. It was being seen. Truly seen. And sometimes the people society overlooks the fastest are the very ones capable of changing everything.